In a world where power defines everything and secrets are buried deeper than loyalty, I never expected my life to collide with his again. Not like this. Northridge University was supposed to be my fresh start, a place where I could disappear into the background and survive. But fate had other plans. My roommate, Damien Blackwell, the billionaire heir with eyes like storms and a past that somehow knows mine better than I do. What began as tension soon twisted into something intense, dangerous, magnetic. And the deeper I fall into his world, the clearer it becomes. Nothing here is an accident, including us. This is the story of how scholarship became the one thing a Blackwell wasn't supposed to want. Do not forget to subscribe to Sweet Serenity. I never believed in fate, mostly because fate never seemed to believe in me. But the morning I moved into Northridge University, the most prestigious, competitive, and academically brutal institution in the country, I felt something tighten in my chest. Like the universe had finally decided to stop ignoring me, but not in a good way. Northridge wasn't just a university, it was a world where the wealthy walked like gods, where brilliance was currency, and where the poor like me learned how to blend into the walls. I clutched my acceptance letter tighter as I stood before the massive marble building that housed the first-year luxury dorms. The glass windows gleamed like they were polished with money and privilege. Their reflections showed me exactly what I looked like: messy dark curls, backpack from a thrift shop, jeans that had faded from wear, not design. Aiden Cole, the scholarship kid. The outsider, the beau who didn't belong. I took a deep breath and stepped inside. The lobby was too quiet, soft classical music, velvet sofas, gold accents everywhere. Students moved with confidence, like they had lived in places like this their whole lives. Meanwhile, I stuck out like a comma, a sentence that wasn't supposed to pause. Room 218. That was my dorm number. I rehearsed it again and again in my mind as I carried my suitcase down the hall lined with oil paintings and antique lamps that probably cost more than my entire existence. But when I reached the door, my confidence dissolved, because it was already open, and someone was inside. He stood near the window, back turned, sunlight forming a glow around him like he belonged to the light. Tall, very tall, broad shoulders beneath a tailored black sweater. Black slacks, expensive shoes, posture relaxed yet commanding. He looked like a painting. No, like a warning. I froze in the doorway. My fingers tightened on my suitcase handle. He turned slowly, as if he felt my presence in his bones. And that's when everything inside me stopped. Damien Blackwell, the infamous heir to the Blackwell dynasty. Old money, new money, endless money. The kind of student whose name carried weight like a title. His face was sharp, flawless, controlled inky hair. Storm gray eyes that held something ancient and unreadable, lips that looked like they rarely softened. Everyone knew Damien Blackwell. Everyone feared him. Everyone respected him. And somehow, he was standing in my dorm room. My roommate. His eyes moved to me slowly, deliberately, like he was tracing every detail of me he had already memorized. A shiver crawled up my spine. "Hi," I whispered, because my voice betrayed me. He didn't respond immediately. He just stared. Not the way rich beaux usually stare at scholarship students with judgment or superiority. No. Damien's stare was something else. Something I couldn't understand or name. It was familiarity. Deep, unsettling, to certain. Like he already knew me. Like he had been waiting for me. My heart thudded painfully. Finally, he spoke, his voice low, smooth, almost intimate. "Aiden Cole." I stiffened. "How do you know my name?" His lips lifted. Barely, just the ghost of something unreadable. "It was on the assignment sheet," he said simply. But that wasn't the truth. I didn't know how, but I felt it. His tone, his stare, the way he said my name like a memory, not a label. My suitcase slipped slightly from my hand. "So, you're my roommate?" "Yes." One word. Cold, definitive. I swallowed. "Okay, I'll try not to be a bother." His gaze darkened for a moment. "You won't." Silence stretched between us, heavy to heavy. I moved toward the empty bed, trying not to look at him again, but my curiosity betrayed me. I peeked. He was still watching me, unmoving, unblinking, like he was studying me. No, like he was remembering me. My chest tightened again. I had never met him before. I would remember someone like him, but something in his eyes suggested otherwise. Something in his calm, controlled posture whispered, "I know you. I've seen you before. You're not new to me." But that was impossible. I set my backpack down, unsure whether to speak again or pretend he didn't exist. He solved that for me. "Do you mind the left side of the room?" he asked. I shook my head quickly. "No, it's fine." "Good." His voice had that soft, dangerous tone, the kind that felt like velvet but cut like a blade. I avoided his gaze again, pulling clothes from my suitcase and arranging them into the small wardrobe that looked comically tiny compared to his. His side of the room was organized, expensive, dark academic aesthetics everywhere. Black books, leather-bound journals, silver pens. A strange glass case sitting on his desk. He didn't explain it. I didn't ask, but every time I turned slightly, I felt his eyes on me. Not mocking, not irritated, just watching, like he was making sure I didn't vanish. Minutes passed. Finally, when I couldn't take the silence anymore, I cleared my throat. I heard you're taking the advanced literature course." He didn't look away. I'm in that class too." A pause. His eyes flickered. "That's not surprising," he said softly. A strange warmth pressed against the back of my neck, like his voice itself was touching me. I frowned. "What do you mean?" He didn't answer. Instead, he walked past me too close, brushing the slightest hair against my shoulder before heading for the door. "I'll be back," he said. "Try not to lock yourself out." Then he left. The door shut, and I sagged onto the bed, heart pounding violently. What was that? Why did he look at me like he knew me? Why did he say my name like a memory from a life I never lived? And why did his voice sound like a promise? I didn't know then, but Damien Blackwell wasn't just my roommate. He was my past, my secret, my danger, and the beginning of the one truth that would change everything. He remembered me. He had always remembered me, and he would never let me go again. From the moment Damien Blackwell walked out of our room, leaving nothing behind but the faint scent of clean cedar and something sharper I couldn't name, my mind refused to rest because something about the way he looked at me clung to my thoughts like a shadow that refused to disappear. And even as I unpacked the rest of my things, trying to distract myself with the rhythm of folding clothes and placing notebooks in neat piles, the image of his eyes, those dark silver eyes that held too much recognition for someone I was supposedly meeting for the first time, kept replaying in loops that made my chest tighten in confusion. The room felt different without him in it, like his presence had lingered in the air and tightened the atmosphere, making me feel like I wasn't alone even though the door was closed and the hallway outside was silent. I kept asking myself why he stared at me like that, why he said my name like he had rehearsed it 100 times, why he paused before responding like he was choosing how much truth he wanted to reveal. I tried to shake the feeling off by stepping outside to explore the campus, but every hallway I walked through, every glass window I passed, every whispered conversation I overheard felt like it held something I was supposed to notice, and the entire university suddenly seemed too large, too polished, too heavy with secrets I didn't understand, as though the world I had just entered wasn't simply an academic institution but a stage where every person knew their lines except me. Students passed by dressed in designer coats and expensive shoes, carrying books bound in leather, speaking softly about internships, legacies, and family businesses, and I felt like an outlier drifting through a universe built for people with last names that meant something. Still, my mind kept circling back to Damien, his perfectly arranged side of the room, the smooth, collected tone of his voice, the question that lingered under every glance he gave me. It was ridiculous to think he knew me from somewhere else. Completely ridiculous. My childhood was ordinary, quiet, far from the world of luxury and influence he grew up in. There was no possible way our paths had crossed. But the way he said my name refused to support that logic. When I returned to the dorm later that evening, I froze because Damien was already inside, seated at his desk like he had been carved into the setting with precision, the overhead lamp casting a soft amber glow across his face, highlighting his sharp jawline and the calm composure he carried like a born king. He didn't look up immediately, but I felt him notice me, as if his awareness stretched across the room and wrapped itself around me. "You're back," he said quietly, too quietly, as if the words weren't just an observation, but something he had been waiting to say. I nodded awkwardly, not trusting my voice, and started toward my side of the room, but something in his posture made me pause. He slowly closed the book he was reading and turned in his chair to face me fully, his eyes locking onto mine with a focus that made the air thicken, and for a moment, I felt pinned in place, like he was piecing together something I didn't even know needed piecing. "How was your walk around campus?" he asked, but his tone didn't match the simplicity of the question. It was too even, too controlled, too intimate. I swallowed, forcing a shrug. It's huge, beautiful, also intimidating. His eyes softened, but not in a comforting way, in a knowing way, like he expected that answer, like he foresaw every insecurity I tried to hide beneath my calm exterior. You'll get used to it, he said, his voice deepening slightly. Northridge becomes smaller once you learn what to ignore. There was something strange in the way he phrased that, something that suggested he wasn't talking about the buildings or the classes, but the people, the culture, the unspoken hierarchy that ruled this place. I sat down on my bed slowly, watching him, and he watched me right back, and there was something heavy about the silence that settled between us, as though he wanted to say something but forced himself not to, as though he was measuring the moment. Damien, I finally said, my voice low and uncertain, earlier today. You looked at me like you. I hesitated, unsure how not to sound foolish. Like you recognized me. His expression didn't change at first, he didn't even blink. But something flickered behind his eyes just for a second, like a door opening and slamming shut so quickly I couldn't tell if I imagined it. Then, in the smoothest tone I had ever heard, he replied, you're imagining it, but it didn't sound like the truth. Not at all. If anything, it sounded like a carefully constructed wall. I tried to smile, forcing myself to look away before I drowned in that gaze of his, but then he spoke again softly, almost reluctantly. Aiden. My name in his voice made something in me still completely. If there's anything you ever need help with here, he said, you can come to me. That shouldn't have meant anything. It should have sounded like basic kindness between roommates. But coming from Damien Blackwell, the cold, unreachable, emotionally unreadable Damien, it felt like a loaded promise. Why? I asked before I could stop myself. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, studying me with a seriousness that made the room feel smaller, warmer, and far too intimate for two people who barely knew each other. When he finally spoke, his voice dropped into a lower, quieter tone, one that vibrated with something old, something buried. Because I said so, he replied. It wasn't an answer, but it was the only one he was willing to give. The next few minutes passed in a slow, unnerving haze where neither of us spoke. Yet the silence wasn't empty, it was filled with tension, with questions, with unspoken truths that pressed against the walls of the room like they wanted to escape. At some point, he stood up and moved past me, and again, the closeness of his presence sent a shiver through my spine. As he reached the door, he paused, turning halfway toward me, his expression unreadable but intense. Don't go wandering around campus at night, he said. It's not safe. There was weight behind his warning. Too much weight. Why not? I asked. His eyes locked onto mine. And in that moment, I felt something stir, something dark, something familiar to him but foreign to me. Because there are things here you don't understand yet, he said softly, and I'd rather you didn't find out the wrong way. Then he left, closing the door with a calmness that didn't match the storm he left inside me. My heart raced as I stared at the empty space where he stood just seconds before, and a strange fear collected in my chest, not because I felt unsafe with Damien near me, but because I felt safer than I should. Like he wasn't warning me to protect me from the campus, but from something he already knew was connected to me. Something from the past I didn't remember, but he did, and he was hiding it. The morning after the gala felt like waking up inside someone else's life because I kept replaying everything that happened. Damien's hand lingering on my back when he guided me through the crowd. The way his father's eyes stabbed through me like I was some low-class contaminant. The strange heaviness in Damien's chest when he whispered don't go anywhere before leaving me alone for almost an hour. And the hollow ache I felt throughout the night, even when surrounded by crystal chandeliers and people dripping in diamonds. As though I had stepped into a world that wasn't mine and everyone could smell the difference the same way they smell fear, sharp, bitter, unavoidable. And now as I sat on my bed staring at the silent room, while the sun hardened into brighter shades on the window pane, I realized I was spiraling in thoughts I couldn't translate into words. I kept thinking about how Damien returned later with that strange, wild expression in his eyes, like someone had tried to break him, and he refused to shatter. How he pulled me out of the ballroom as if rescuing me from a fire only he could see. How his voice trembled when he told me his father wanted me out of his life because I was a distraction. And how his fingers curled into mine with a desperation I didn't understand yet. Because what was Aiden Cole to a guy like Damien Blackwell, heir to the Blackwell dynasty, student body royalty? Someone whose name alone carried the kind of weight that made people straighten their shirts and fix their posture. I didn't know how to behave when someone like that looked at me like I was a lifeline he wasn't ready to lose, and even now the memory throbbed in my chest like an echo that refused to fade as I walked across the suite to the kitchenette where Damien stood leaning against the marble counter, his hair messy in a way that didn't match the perfectly symmetrical aesthetic he carried at school, his black sweater hanging off him slightly like he hadn't slept and didn't care enough to pretend he had. He didn't turn immediately, and I entered, and the silence between us felt thick with unspoken things, the kind that hover like fog, visible but untouchable, and maybe that's why my throat tightened, because I could sense something shifting in him, something heavy and dangerous, something that had been building since the moment we met, and maybe long before that, something that scared me because I didn't know what to do with it or what it would mean for the both of us. When Damien finally looked at me, was with an expression I had never seen on him before, a mixture of guilt and determination that made my chest squeeze painfully as he exhaled my name slowly. Aiden. Like he wasn't sure if saying it would fix something or break it. And before I could gather myself, he crossed the room in 3 calm steps, stopping close enough that I could smell the faint cedar scent he always carried, close enough that I had to look up slightly to meet his gaze, close enough that the air between us buzzed with something electric and unsettling. He apologized, not in the casual, careless way rich beaux apologize when they want to appear humble, but with this raw, unfiltered honesty that made the words almost too heavy to hold, telling me he shouldn't have dragged me into his world, that he should have protected me from his father's judgment, that he never wanted me to feel small because of him. And all the while I kept staring at him, trying to understand why he looked like he was the one hurting more than I was, why the thought of losing my presence in his life made his voice tighten, why he kept stepping closer, as though my silence was pulling him in. Then he said something that felt like it cracked the floor beneath me, because he whispered that he didn't just remember me from the gala, or from Crestwood, or from our first awkward roommate interaction. He remembered me from years ago, from a childhood moment I had forgotten, a memory buried under time and normal life, a memory he held onto like a secret flame he kept hidden from everyone. He told me there was a day, a hospital waiting room when we were both kids, when I had given him a half-melted candy and told him it was to make the sadness go away, a small gesture from a child who didn't understand the weight Damien was carrying at the time. And he said that moment was the first time anyone had ever been kind to him without expecting something in return. My head spun because I couldn't remember it, but he remembered it so vividly that it shaped the way he looked at me from the moment I stepped into our shared dorm room, and that explained the strange familiarity I felt when he first said my name. That explained the intensity in his gaze. That explained why he sometimes stared at me like he was searching for the boy who once saved him in a way no one else could. Before I could respond, he lifted his hand slowly, hesitantly, as if asking permission without words, and when his fingers brushed my cheek lightly, I felt that same spark from the gala, that strange, terrifying pull. And I didn't step back because something inside me whispered that maybe I didn't want to. Maybe I wanted to know why my heart raced whenever he looked at me like that. Maybe I wanted to know what this connection between us really meant. Maybe I wanted to understand why Damien Blackwell, the untouchable, unreachable Damien, seemed to unravel only around me. He leaned in, not enough to cross the line, but enough to blur it, and whispered that he wasn't supposed to want this, that he wasn't supposed to choose me over the expectations chained around his life, that he wasn't supposed to care this much, but he did. And he couldn't hide it anymore. And the way his voice trembled made me feel like the world had narrowed down to just the two of us in a space where reality, Ben, and nothing outside the room mattered. Just when I felt the ground shift beneath me again, there was a loud knock at the door, sharp and commanding, the kind that carried authority and danger mixed into one, and Damien instantly stiffened, his expression darkening, as if he already knew who it was. His hand lowering reluctantly from my face, as the tension in the air flipped from emotional to urgent in one heartbeat. He whispered, "Stay behind me," a tone that left no room for argument, and as he walked toward the door with that cold, controlled posture he used when bracing for a fight, something inside me tightened, because I realized this wasn't just about school or privilege or an uncomfortable gala interaction. This was bigger, deeper, darker, something threaded into Damien's life long before I became part of it, something that had claws and shadows and secrets. And whatever stood on the other side of that door was about to pull me into a world I wasn't prepared for, but one I was already entangled in through him. And when the door finally opened and I saw who was standing there, expression stone cold and eyes burning with an authority that could silence entire rooms, I understood instantly that my life was about to change in ways I wasn't ready for. And part one of this story was only just ending, because everything ahead was about to get far more complicated.